Every one of these doctors said, how do you know so much about this? Maybe I have a natural ability. Maybe I should have done that instead of running for president. Anybody that needs a test gets a test. They're there. They have the test. And the tests are beautiful.
This analysis continues on from my How Deadly is the Coronavirus Case Fatality Rate analysis that seeks to conclude in a probable trend forecast for the unfolding coronavirus stocks bear market that has caught most market participants by surprise, one where the formulaic mainstream press sees a bottom in virtually every bounce. Well, the Dow's latest plunge makes a mockery of such expectations of barely a few trading days ago. For as I try and point out from time to time, that technical analysis on its own is not enough, which is why I try and keep my antennas focused on any outside market influencing factors that could drive stock prices at some point in the future, where we have the usual drivers such as population growth, climate change, governments printing money that resulted in driving the Dow from the 1930s low of 40 to the recent record high of 29,600. For without money printing there would have been no exponential stocks bull market, as the indices tend to rotate in new rising corporations and eject old dying corporations. Likewise, back in January, when most were shrugging their shoulders at Corona what? My antennas were firmly focused on what was taking place in Hubei China, that was sending alarm bells ringing despite at the time the Dow was busy making a series of new all-time highs. However, the whole of this extensive analysis that concludes in the detailed trend forecast for the stock market for March and April 2020 has already first been made available to patrons who support my work. So for immediate first access to all of my analysis and trend forecasts, then do consider becoming a patron by supporting my work for just $3 per month. Whilst monitoring the unfolding pandemic in China, I was increasingly struck by the fact that our governments in the West were just not acting as I thought they would be. I'm no virologist or scientist, but if I could see the unfolding catastrophic consequences of the coronavirus, then why have our governments been sat on their lazy asses for at least the past 6 weeks and basically done nothing? They have been shockingly negligent, and my assumptions of early February that the West would do a better job of containing the coronavirus than China have all gone up in smoke. Inept, incompetent, as it appears the likes of the CDC and Public Health England were doing their utmost to bring the virus into densely populated areas that risk the virus outbreaks. I'm no conspiracy theorist, but various government actions were at the very least negligent and at worst criminal. You don't fly in infected people and then distribute them across the country. You don't allow air travel from regions with out of control outbreaks. They did nothing. Even now as I write, the US has yet to actually begin mass testing for the coronavirus, which given its lethal nature, not because of the 1% to 3% death rate, but the fact that infected people can be asymptomatic for as long as 2 weeks, which means quietly spreading viral particles, all whilst the likes of the CDC are sleeping, unable to even pick up the phone and place an order for the coronavirus tests, and only doing so a week ago. China looks like it's gained a grip on its pandemic by crippling its economy, even if the figures for the numbers infected are likely still being underreported for political reasons, which obviously the general population don't really trust. Unfortunately, the West has very badly dropped the ball by never acting proactively to prevent outbreaks. Instead, the imbeciles continue to let infected Chinese nationals and others fly into our virus-free nations, spreading their viral particles that have now sparked outbreaks across Europe and the US, which translated into my unfolding analysis that increasingly warned that the coronavirus stock's bear market is nowhere near bottom, where outbreaks outside of Asia, such as in the UK and US, are only just beginning, whilst incompetence continues to rule. For instance, the US is still waiting on delivery of 1.2 million tests, and the CDC promises will be sent out this week. This is a recipe for disaster that could have been prevented. What we are about to witness in the West was not inevitable. So as of writing, the current tally of 216 infected in the UK and 438 in the US, i.e. as of 7th of March, is likely underreporting the actual number of infected in both nations by several orders of magnitude, as the price paid for gross incompetence bordering on criminal, and it does not help having an idiot in the White House. So if I had to put a number on how many are infected in the UK and US right now, given the percentage who are testing positive, and taking into account abysmal lack of testing, then likely right now the UK has at least 1,000 infected people, many of whom which will become ill and tested and make their way into the official data over the coming week. So this next week, expect the UK to soon pass 1,000 infected people as they ramp up testing, because 21,500 tests today, whilst a lot better than the US, is still not enough to contain this virus. Whilst for the US, well, with less than 6,000 tests to date, of which 7.4% are testing positive, implies a huge pool of infected people. A number that I can only guess at being at least 4,000 right now, most of whom will start showing symptoms over the coming week, whilst continuing to infect typically 3 to 4 others, as was the warning out of South Korea. So a week from now, if the US actually starts rolling out these tests in significant numbers, then the US infected tally could easily increase tenfold, i.e. to 4,000 during the coming week. Thus, the implied infections trend for the US is currently running at about 3 times worse than my forecast, as people are not being tested in enough numbers, which they should start doing during the coming week, given that the CDC has promised to deliver at least 1 million test kits to states during the week. Whilst it is too early to speculate on the CFR for the UK and US, as the decline from 5.75% on 5th March to 4.34% on the 7th of March illustrates. The lack of US testing means that there is a massive hidden, unrecorded pool of infected people that continues to quietly expand every day until they finally start to fall ill and end up in A&E and go on to infect medical staff. And from what I see, the US is still largely in a state of denial, with political campaign rallies continuing as though the virus does not exist. So perhaps the US will only truly start to act when the body bags start piling up in their hundreds. Thus, the number of infected looks set to explode higher, far beyond today's tally of 450 infected and 19 deaths. My forecast is for 13,000 infected by the end of the March for the US. Well, that number now could easily double, because without knowing who is infected, then there is no quarantine and containment measures in place. I will look at updating my forecasts into the end of April for the UK and US at the end of this week. And the rest of this extensive analysis that concludes in a detailed trend forecast for the stock market for March and April 2020 has already first been made available to patrons who support my work. So for immediate first access to all of my analysis and trend forecasts, then do consider becoming a patron by supporting my work for just $3 per month. And also remember to subscribe to this YouTube channel for the next video in this series as we chart the unfolding coronavirus megatrend of 2020. Vitamin D3 could save your life, so make sure you get some today.